convenient to you, but I wanted to reach out to you because of this, because I think we can help you. That's so much more impactful than just going right into a spiel and someone's like, I've got a customer right in my face. Like, I can't talk to you.
This is Morgan J. Ingram here, host of the SDR Chronicles, bringing you sales development leaders, practitioners, reps, and even marketers to talk about what to do in sales development, what to do as a sales leader, and how to really grow your career into something special. So today I have here Ryan. He's doing a lot of great stuff in sales development. He's a leader. He's been in the game for a while, and he's going to tell us today how to really have great cold call introductions. So I'm super excited about this because it's always interesting to see how people handle cold calls. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Ryan talk a little bit more about himself, where he's coming from, what he does, and before we go into the topic of the day.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Morgan. It's so awesome to be here and get to connect with you again. And, one of the things that I was so excited about when I saw, this is what, episode 83?
Is that? I mean, it's going to be probably number 88, 89. It's going fast.
Oh my man, what could be more exciting?
Episodes.
So it's so awesome to be here. And I think as sales leaders, one of our job is really to empower and equip the next generation of salespeople. One of my biggest frustrations, I actually wrote a post about it on LinkedIn last week, is this idea of the sales profession dying. And I hear that all the time, and I see it on LinkedIn, like, oh, yeah, invest in marketing, don't invest in sales and cold calling. And I think the only way we put that to death is by really equipping the next generation well. And I think that's the whole purpose of these videos. So excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you, man. And that is the main purpose of these videos. It's speaking truths. Like, I've been in the SDR role, currently an SDR manager role. And, I solely believe in speaking truths on who you actually are and like what you have done. And so these are things I've done. I'm saying, hey, look, this is it, and so excited to kind of hear your best practices. So want to kind of hear your thoughts are on cold calling. Like, what's your overall thoughts on that? And how effective do you believe cold calling really is?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I get that question all the time. And, one of the things that I ran into at Active, so my experience, and I'll start by giving a little bit of an introduction to who I am, and then kind of segue into that for sure. So I started my career at a company called Active Network. It's the largest online registration company in the world, between 250 and 300 salespeople, about 3,000 total employees. So a pretty good sized tech company. And I started inside sales. So basically right about the SDR role. That's like where my sweet spot was.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by incredible leadership. The leaders that we had, Anthony Owens, Matt Amston, Steven Brandstetter, these guys just around me have now gone on, are VPs and directors at Amazon, VPs of sales at this company, VPs all over. But they surrounded me and really they did what you're doing now, right? They equipped me as a young salesperson to be effective. And, one of the things that in cold calling can be such a grind, but the more consistent you can be with it, the more, you've talked in some of your other videos about just staying steady. And what, as a salesperson, to have a steady pipeline, cold calling is so important to that. And there's all these statistics that I see all the time coming out that are like, oh, don't cold call on this day, don't cold call on this day, cold call between hours of this and this. And it's like, those are all fine. But when it comes down to it, it's just hard work, and you can't outsmart the process. You just have to get after it sometimes. And so my experience at Active was really started by just getting that reinforced by me by great leaders. And 4 years as an inside sales rep, I was President's Club all 4 years. I was the AE of the year for our market in 2013. And so after that point, I was moved to the sales training manager role at the company. So it was my job at 25 years old to empower 200 salespeople. So I learned a ton about what actually it takes to train and equip people versus what it is to just go out and get it done. And so after a year of that, I transitioned to being the director of talent development. So I was in charge of all of training, which was super impactful, but another job I was just not equipped for at 26 years old, training an entire community of employees. But, you know, I work with a light business development group, and we just go into companies that have a great product, great infrastructure, but have no idea how to build a sales team, how to equip a sales team. And so we go in, provide resources, provide management, and all of that. And so back to your original question of, you know, is cold calling effective? I think it absolutely is effective. Whether you are a great cold caller, a great conversationalist, whether you're outgoing, whether you are very introverted, it doesn't matter. I have seen hundreds of salespeople that fall within that whole scope of personality traits. And I believe anyone can be successful at it, but you have to be aggressive. You have to be someone who wants to be successful, and you can't be afraid to have bad cold calls. Like last week, we had a brand new guy, first day on the phones, he got hung up on 5 times. And, you know, people who were pretty hostile and rude about it. Yeah. And then, you know, his last cold call today was a on the fly demo, and he just got after it, and he was tenacious, and he was successful. That's what I've seen be successful. And I think it's absolutely true in all states. Cold calling is important.
I love it. And so you talked about all these accolades that you had. You're in the President's Club, you were a top performer, you eventually got accelerated into a sales trainer role, which obviously that's super important because you're giving people value and how to really be really good at their roles. Would you amount that success to your ability to cold call?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it started in 2010 when I was my first full year on the floor as a sales rep. I won the Dialer Award for our company. And at that point, I had no sales skills at all. I was fresh out of college. Yeah. I could communicate, I could talk with people, but I've always been really competitive. And one of the things that's always really driven me is, you know, I don't know how familiar you are with Strength Finders or anything, but I've been always, so winning others over is like one of my top 5. And so it's always a game for me. Cold calling has always been a game of how can I get this person that I don't know to converse with me and talk with me. And so I always had the mind frame, and I know this is like a pretty standard sales response. If you have like any sales interview ever, you hear this response of people being like, oh, I generate all my own leads, and anything I get from marketing is just gravy. But I actually had that approach. And so I was always the first one in. I was always the first one to be done with my cold calls every day. And my goal was, I was East Coast territory and on the West Coast. So I was like, if I can get my cold calls done before other people are in the office, and I can be really efficient with what I'm doing, then I'm going to be able to outperform everyone else. And I did on a consistent basis. So yeah, I would absolutely attribute my success in my 4 years as an AE to cold calling.
I love it. And so obviously the main topic of this conversation is cold call introductions. So tell us some introductions that worked really well, and tell us some introductions that were terrible.
You know, that is such a good question and a segue into this, because I think the first thing we need to look at with cold calls is, what is your intent, right? What's your intent and what's the goal of a cold call? And I think the answer of that should be always, with every call, is to push the sale forward in some way or another. Whether that's your cold call is just to gain the decision maker, you need to know who that person is. You're on the phone with a gatekeeper. You just want to get through to who it is. Or you want to book a demo, whatever it is, you want to push the sale forward. And so if I look at good versus bad intros, let me start with bad. The worst intros that I ever hear are the ones where salespeople are trying to trick the clients into having a conversation with them. In Active, we ran into this all the time because it was online registration. And so people at Active would call a client, a parent who wants to register for one of their events. Right. So they'd be like, hey, I was on your website and I was interested in your programs. And they'd be like, oh yeah, what are you interested in? And they're like, oh, well, I have this kid who, wants to come to camp. And they're like, oh, great. And then they're talking. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and I sell online registration. And instantly people are thrown off by that. Instantly it puts people's walls up, because our job as salespeople is not to trick people. Our job is to be very consultative in our approach, so people see us as trusted business advisors, so we can get to a place where we're actually having real, meaningful conversations with people and getting to the roots of problems. And cold calls are the first opportunity for us to do that. And so if we're coming off right away as someone who's trying to sling you something or trick you into buying something you don't need, you're immediately turned off. So one thing that I'll say that I've found in what makes a really successful cold call, especially a successful cold call intro, is really having just a firm understanding. This is who I am. This is why I'm calling. Did I catch you at a bad time? Have you heard of us before? Companies like yours, we work with companies like yours who are looking to increase revenue. Let's see, struggle with customer retention, want to build a great brand, and that looked similar to what you guys are trying to do. Is that something I would talk to you about, or is there someone else I should talk to about that? Right, like something just really clean like that. It really creates value in that first section, and you come across as someone who's not just a long list of people. It's someone who's done research, who understands their business, and it shows that you have credibility in the marketplace. So that structure is one that I've found has had a lot of success, and that's cross-market.
So you see, by asking a question on the front end on the introduction, it leads to a more intriguing conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it really starts, so if our intent is to come across as a consultative salesperson and someone to be trusted, the first thing that I always started with at Active was, did I catch you at a bad time?
Right.
People are extremely busy, like you make cold calls all the time, and the last thing people want to hear is someone's trying to sell me something. And as soon as I answer the phone and realize that it's a salesperson, my walls go up, and I'm thinking, how quickly can I get off this call? And so if I come across and say, hey, I'm not trying to hassle you, I'm not trying to catch you when it's not convenient, we can talk right now if you're free, or we can talk whenever it's convenient to you, but I want to reach out to you because of this, because I think we can help you. That's so much more impactful than just going right into a spiel and someone's like, I've got a customer right in my face. Like, I can't talk to you right now,
Exactly.
Yeah, so I found leading with those questions have been really helpful.
That's super key. So do you find, I guess, the bad intros are where it's kind of sound like a same salesperson, and then the follow-up question to that is, do you find that the good intros that you mentioned are because you're breaking a normal pattern that most people would do?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point. I think we, as a whole, when you think salesperson, we now think used car, right? We think used car lot, to look out for their best interest, but you're trying to look out for your own success or trying to sling something on people. That immediately turns people off. People love. I heard this quote, and I think it was a Mike Weinberg quote, and he said, people love to buy, they hate to be sold. And it's so true, and that starts, and that's, I think, one of the main reasons that cold calling has become so difficult. It's because people just think they're going to get tricked all the time. And if you come off as someone whose intent is clear, intent is so much more important than technique when it comes to cold calling. And if you can make your intent really clear up front, you're going to have so much more success.
Yeah, and that is the biggest thing. So how do you build that intent? How do you build that? How do you really get that awareness for yourself right off the get-go from the phone?
Yeah. I think the first thing you do is come prepared. I think people are used to now getting cold called by an auto dialer, where people don't know anything about their business. They don't know anything about who they should be talking to. They don't know anything about the market itself or the industry that they're calling into. And so as salespeople, we can equip ourselves with industry knowledge, But then we can also be very, very specific about our cold calls. So even when we're making 30, 40 cold calls in a day, we can still pull up a website, ask them questions specifically about their business that you read about on their website. That's going to show that you're credible. That's going to show that you're not there to waste time or to sling something on someone. You're there with the purpose of helping them achieve great things for their business. And if you come across that way, people are going to be so much more apt to talk to you. It's like, oh, you actually want to help me. You actually know something about what I'm doing. You're not just winging it and trying to get me to buy your software or your product. I mean, that shows really great intent.
And why do you believe that stands out more?
I think people are just tired. People are just tired of dealing with bad salespeople. Everyone has had a bad sales experience. I had one like a couple of years ago when we were trying to buy a car for my wife. And it was like this salesperson just like super aggressive, super in my face. I was just doing research, and so when you have these bad experiences, you get to a place where salespeople and the buyers can't have honest conversations with one another, because the customers are thinking, man, if I tell them everything about my business, they're going to use that some way to trick me into buying something. Where the salesperson is just like, hey, I want to help you. And if I can help you, a good salesperson, salesperson is a good point. A good salesperson is thinking, hey, how can I help your business? And if it's not a good fit for our product, I don't want to create a win-lose situation where our company wins and the customer loses, because we all know that is the worst situation you can have. And so, yeah, I think if you create that, you're able to have much more honest conversations with one another, and that always produces better results, always. And I think if we start that way on the cold call, then that's just going to make the rest of the relationship so much better. And again, when you came back to your question about asking questions in the front end, if we're really, really focused on asking the right questions and understanding their business, then it's just going to make the rest of the sales cycle so much smoother, because we're going to actually understand what's going on, and we're going to set the precedent that we're always going to be trying to learn about their business, and people are going to be much more apt to share with us what's going on, and create more value for them. So, yeah. Yeah,
and you talked about learning more about their business. So what are you doing to research before you make that call?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I generally, if you're trying to make 50 phone calls a day, that's like a 4-hour chunk of time if you're going to do it. So I would say the main research that you can do, obviously within a market, you can do a ton more on your own time. But if you pull up their website, there's always specific things that you can find or look at within a product or a company that you can use or reference in a call. Like at Active, one of the things we always looked at was, what are their current providers of registration? What kind of events are they running? Do they have any examples of social media on their website? Just all those things, little things that you're like, this is just a normal website, but you can all use those as trigger points for questioning. So, what kind of engagement are you seeing on your social media? What is it now? What would you like it to be? As far as your level of engagement or communication with them, and how has that impacted your relationships with them? Those are all questions that you can ask once you've gathered a little bit of information on their website, and they can be really, really specific and intricate, or it can be very simple, but it just needs to be specific to that company that you're calling.
And that's just through their website, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would, I'm such a huge advocate of cold calling as your main source of lead generation, but use every tool you have at your disposal, right? I mean, LinkedIn has become such an incredible tool for connecting. And I saw your guys' video on using social a couple episodes ago. Well, by the time this episode will go, it'll probably be like 15 episodes before. But,
probably.
Yeah. But that episode where it's just talking about how you create a message of value when you're communicating over social. But yeah, I think there's ways that you can gather information about the key decision makers at an organization through LinkedIn. You can go in more prepared about their history and just say, hey, I was on LinkedIn and saw you also worked here. What transitioned you to this organization, or how did you end up here? I mean, all those things just make you sound so much more credible, and just less like an auto dialer or a robot on the phone.
Why do you think that so many people do such terrible cold call introductions?
Oh my word! I think for one thing, they're not equipped, and I think that. Sorry, what was that?
Cool wise or leadership wise?
Leadership wise.
Okay.
I don't think the leadership that we have in place, and this is a very general statement, so this isn't true for everyone, but I haven't seen the level of coaching required. I haven't seen the level of training required to be successful at cold calling. I haven't seen the time devoted to call listening. I see an SDR type role, and the sales leadership says, okay, we hired this SDR, we want him on the phone next week. And what it takes to really train effectively, I mean, it takes weeks of preparation, takes mock calls. I think sales leadership also is just really, really about quick results in general. And so, they want to rush through the cold call process, and they want to get straight from a cold call to a demo instead of maybe necessarily doing more of a discovery call in between, which will equip into a better demo, into a better close, into a better negotiation, all of that. And so I think it's twofold. I think we rush the process a little bit, and then we rush the calls once we get into them.
Yeah, the rushing the calls and get into it is not the move. So tell the audience what you believe. And you talked about the best ones, right? But what do you believe is what is your go-to cold call introduction that you have to do if it's just not going well for you?
What's my go-to? Sorry, it broke up on that.
Oh, yeah,
last part.
Your go-to cold call introduction.
Oh man, my go-to cold call introduction is the exact same as what I said before. It is, hey, this is Ryan from Active Network. Did I catch you at a bad time? Or, hey, how are you doing today? That's totally dependent, by the way. I've heard people be successful when they say, how are you doing? I've heard people say, just go right into it and be successful. I always say, how are you doing? I think you come off as much less of a robot. Any opportunity to build rapport, even on a cold call, just bring people's shields down a little bit, I'm going to use that opportunity. So asking that question is huge for me. The second piece, I always say, did I catch you at a bad time? So I go, hey, this is Ryan from Active Network. How are you doing? And then based on their response, I say, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? Most of the time, their response is no. Sometimes they'll say yes. If they say yes, then I say, man, I got my calendar open. I'm happy to call you back when it's convenient for you. What times do you have available in the next couple days? If not, if they say no, I say, have you heard of Active Network before? Or have you heard of so-and-so company before? Most of the time, their response will be no. There's only been a few cold calls that people have said, yeah. I actually know that. So generally, it's just a good bridge right into the next spot, which is getting to share who you are. So then I'd say, man, Active Network, we work with, depending on the organization, I would give a relevant example of a client. So, we work with University of Florida for all their sports camps. And they came to us because they wanted to increase their registrations, get more people involved in their programs, and build a great community around the Florida Gators. Is that something I would talk about with you, or is there someone else at the organization I should speak with?
Right.
Just that is, for me, the cleanest intro you can have. It gets straight through everything, and it is on how people respond to you, right? Because people can respond to you really harshly, and most of the time, the conversation is going to go something like this. Hey, this is Ryan from Active Network. How are you? Fine. Great. Did I catch you at a bad time? No. Okay. Have you heard of Active Network before? No. Right. And then you're right into your, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so most of the time you're not going to get happy. I'm confused. I'm in the middle of something, right? And that intro to me gets you right through that process really quickly and easily.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Ryan, as we wrap up this interview, I'm gonna actually like the last few questions because you're providing a lot of value here. Cold calling.
Good. I hope so.
You are. So cold calling for an SDR that doesn't want to pick up the phone. What do you tell them?
Oh man, if you don't want to pick up the phone, you're probably not in the right profession, man. Honestly, like I have such a hard time with people who are afraid to call. There's so many stinking excuses out there that I hear daily, but the only thing that is most important is hitting and grinding that phone as much and as often as you can. So main thing I would say is, be true to the process. Get in, make your calls, do what you need to, or else you're just not going to be successful in this profession, which is fine. Sales is not for everybody. Yeah. And, and that's totally fine. But if it's not, then let's move on and let's not waste time and energy on people who are not going to be successful. But I've never seen someone who's not willing to make the calls necessary have long-term success in a sales role. I've never seen it.
Yeah, 100%. And the last question that I ask every single person when they come on the show, what's the one piece of advice that you give to SDRs as they enter into their new roles?
Oh man, I knew that question was coming, and it's still good. So I would say, man, be a sponge. Especially our generation. One of the things that I speak loosely, millennials in general have gotten kind of a bad rap in the workplace, but I can't tell you how many salespeople came up to me after 1 month on the floor and said, "Man, I'm ready to be a manager." And I'm like, man, like at 4 years of being the best salesperson, and I was barely promoted. Come on, like so just don't get ahead of yourself. Focus on where you're at, and just surround yourself with the best salesperson at the company. Just put time on their calendar. I mean, the top performers are going to give you their time because they want to impart wisdom and knowledge on the next generation. The people who are really good want to do that. And I was super fortunate to have those people that I worked with at Active. And it totally changed the way that I did things, and totally made me the salesperson I am. So get after it, be a sponge, and surround yourself with great people. Though I know I only had one thing, but those are like all intertwined for me in my mind.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being on the SDR Chronicles today and providing knowledge, insight, and wisdom for people that are watching this channel. I know I learned a lot of good things about cold calling because I know it's always that thing, especially the introduction. That's one of the hardest things. So as I always say, guys, keep dialing, and I'll see you guys soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan.